So here we are again on behalf of Valour Canada in another Canadian National Memorial, this time in the village of Passchendaele. And Passchendaele strikes horror into the minds of many people because of what it means. It's often described as being a completely futile battle, a battle which is a waste of lives. Let's have a think about it, and then let's have a think about what it actually might really mean. First thing is that by the late summer of 1917, Allied forces have already blown the Germans off the ridge at Messines. 21 mines, not all of them go off. Explosions heard in London drives the Germans back. Then the decision is taken, for whatever reason, by General Haig to push the Germans off the ridge that I'm standing on now. Why? Because in the Great War, the most effective weapon system, gas, no, because people have gas masks. Bullets, no, because most of the time you're actually in a trench. You're not on the surface. Flamethrowers, very, very little effect in many ways. So what's the big killer? Artillery. Okay, so what's the most effective thing on the battlefield? It's a bloke, a man with a telephone. Why? Because the guns will be behind the ridge, he's on the ridge, if he can see the target, he can destroy it. And here, 5-6 miles away, is the town, the city of Ypres. And for basically 3 years, the Germans with impunity have been able to shell it. And their plan is to do a couple of things. One, to drive the Germans off the ridge, to blind them. Next thing potentially is to break out towards the Channel ports where there are submarines operating. And the next thing is to get the top of this ridge so that we can now dominate the Germans and they can no longer shell Ypres. It would be saved. The battle begins on the 31st of July, and the idea is to take each successive ridge. It's a very costly battle, and when the battle begins, the Canadians are not here. They are brought in late October, and General Currie, now with a corps, is given a task. The task is to take the top of the ridge where we are now. He says to General Haig, if I do that, I will lose 16,000 men. By that stage, about 750,000 men have been killed, wounded and missing, getting up as far as the lower edge of this ridge. If at that point the battle's called off, the question must be, is why bother with it? What we need to do is to get to the top of the ridge. And starting on the 26th of October, the Canadians mount a series of aggressive actions in absolutely appalling conditions. Just down here, we've got mud. This is mud in October. Imagine the mud of the autumn. And in my hands, I've got a pair of puttees, sometimes called by the Americans wraps. Puttees is an Urdu word, it means bandages. It stops the mud getting into your boots, stops your feet getting trench foot, as we know, together with the use of trench boards. But that area down there is a quagmire. But if you walk up with me now, just towards the memorial, you'll see off to my left a village. Ahead of me, a village. The houses here are modern. So why are the houses on top of the ridge? Well, remember that mud we talked about a minute ago? Where's the mud come from? Well, the mud comes from drainage. The water runs down the slope and floods. It means the trenches lower down, you can't dig dugouts, you can't dig deep trenches. But as a German soldier up here in the village, you've actually got superb conditions, dry, which have been used for millennia by the locals so they can build their houses and they can build their churches. And right there is the church. That is on top of the ridge. And what General Currie does is he launches his Canadian Corps with the intention of capturing this ridge. And when it's taken, by the 10th of November, 4 attacks in appalling conditions, the Germans are driven off the ridge. Suddenly, if I'm a German, if I'm now behind the church and down the slope, I can't see Ypres. I can't see the Allies coming this way. I am blinded. Now, We all know now that in the spring of 1918 the Germans will capture all this again, but for the winter the men are able to dig in, dig deep dugouts, be dry and comfortable on this ridge. A job well done. Another Canadian feat of arms, which I'm afraid people denigrate as being futile. It most certainly wasn't. It was highly successful.